The moment I realized Marcus had been targeting Jessica for her inheritance money, everything clicked into place. His sudden interest in her hadn't been romantic, it had been strategic, and Jessica, still grieving and vulnerable, had been the perfect mark. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I started leaving carefully calculated bait around the apartment. During loud phone calls with my sister, I'd mention how my investment portfolio had grown beyond my expectations, how I was considering buying rental property, how my trust fund would fully vest when I turned 25 in 6 months, giving me access to nearly $200,000. None of it was true, but they devoured every word. Jessica suddenly became the sweetest roommate in the world. She'd ask about my investment strategies while doing dishes. She'd wonder aloud if I'd ever consider loaning money to friends for good opportunities. She'd casually mention how Marcus had such brilliant ideas for growing wealth. Meanwhile, I was building my real case methodically, like the forensic accountant I actually was. I hired a private investigator named Rebecca Chen, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes. I worked with my bank to trace every fraudulent transaction on the credit card Marcus had opened. I documented every theft, every lie, every manipulation with timestamps and evidence. And I started digging into Marcus's past. What I found made my blood run cold. Marcus Thompson wasn't his real name. He was actually Michael Torres, and he had a pattern stretching back 7 years across 4 different states. Each time, he targeted young women who'd recently come into money, inheritance, life insurance, divorce settlements, lottery winnings. Sarah Mitchell in Portland. He'd convinced her to co-sign a loan for a food truck business that never existed. She'd lost her entire inheritance from her grandfather's estate, $45,000. Amanda Rodriguez in Denver. He'd married her and emptied their joint bank accounts during their honeymoon in Mexico. She'd woken up to find him gone along with the $60,000 from her divorce settlement. Jennifer Kim in Austin. He'd used her social security number to open multiple credit cards and destroy her credit while she was battling cancer. She'd lost her home trying to pay off debt she never knew existed. Each woman had been isolated, vulnerable, and trusting. Each had been left financially devastated and emotionally destroyed, and each had tried to report him to police, only to be told it was a civil matter since they'd willingly given him access to their finances. That's when I knew I couldn't just protect myself and Jessica. I had to make sure he never did this to anyone else. I reached out to his previous victims through carefully worded posts in online forums about financial abuse. One by one, they agreed to share their stories and evidence. Rebecca helped me coordinate with law enforcement across multiple jurisdictions. But I needed Marcus to incriminate himself completely, so I set a trap. I started mentioning around Jessica how I was nervous about managing so much money when my trust fund vested, how I wished I had someone trustworthy to help me invest it properly, how I'd heard about these amazing cryptocurrency opportunities, but didn't know enough to invest safely. Within a week, Marcus approached me directly. "Jessica mentioned you're stressed about your inheritance," he said, sitting across from me at our kitchen table while Jessica was at work. "I've been doing really well with some investments. Maybe I could help." I played perfectly naive. "I don't know anything about investing. It's all so complicated." "That's what friends are for," he said, flashing that charming smile that had fooled me for 3 years. "I could set up some accounts for you, handle everything. You wouldn't have to worry about a thing." "Would you really do that?" I asked, widening my eyes like an innocent little lamb. "Of course. We're practically family now with Jessica and me getting married." I let him pitch his scheme over several weeks. Cryptocurrency, foreign exchange, high-yield investment programs, all classic financial fraud tactics wrapped in the package of a caring ex-boyfriend who just wanted to help. Every conversation was recorded on the device Rebecca had given me. Meanwhile, Jessica was growing more desperate. I could see the stress eating at her as Marcus promised bigger and better returns on the money she'd already given him. She'd lost weight, started biting her nails, jumped every time her phone rang. "Have you heard from Marcus today?" she'd ask anxiously. "He was supposed to call about the investment update." I wanted to shake her and scream that he was stealing from her, but I knew she wouldn't believe me. She'd think I was a jealous ex trying to sabotage her happiness. I needed irrefutable proof. 2 weeks before their engagement party, Marcus made his move. "Your trust fund vests next month," he said during one of our investment planning sessions. "We should set up the accounts now, so we're ready to move quickly. Time-sensitive opportunities wait for no one." He handed me official-looking paperwork to sign, power of attorney documents, account authorization forms, everything needed to give him complete control over my fictional fortune. I signed everything with a smile. "I'm so grateful," I told him. "Jessica's so lucky to have found someone like you." The engagement party was perfectly orchestrated theater. Jessica had invited 60 people to celebrate at the community center downtown. She'd spent weeks planning every detail, maxing out her credit cards to throw the perfect event. I watched her flit around the room in a dress I recognized as mine, one she'd borrowed months ago and never returned. She was radiant, completely unaware that she was wearing stolen goods while flaunting my stolen ring. Marcus held court near the bar, telling anyone who'd listen about his successful business ventures and his bright future with Jessica. Several times throughout the night, he caught my eye and smirked, probably thinking about the fortune he'd soon steal from me. If only he knew. I waited until Jessica had shown off my grandmother's ring to every guest, until Marcus had given his speech about finding his soulmate and building their life together, until everyone was relaxed and happy and completely unprepared for what came next. Then I stood up, wine glass in hand. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice carrying across the room. Conversation stopped. All eyes turned to me. Marcus's face went pale, but he managed to keep smiling. "To Jessica and Marcus," I continued, raising my glass. And to that beautiful ring Jessica's wearing tonight. Jessica beamed, extending her hand for everyone to admire the vintage emerald. That ring has such a special history, I said, my voice warm and conversational. It belonged to my grandmother, Eleanor. My mother gave it to me when she passed away last year. I was having it resized at Morrison Jewelers when it went missing from my apartment. The murmur that rippled through the room was immediate. Jessica's face flushed red. She started to pull her hand back, but I continued before she could speak. That's not an accusation, I said quickly. Just an observation. Because here's the interesting thing about my grandmother's ring. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the party's projection system, the same setup Jessica had arranged to show engagement photos. When something that valuable goes missing, you file a police report, you contact your insurance company, you get security footage from nearby businesses. The first image that appeared on the wall was crystal clear surveillance footage of Marcus entering Morrison Jewelers 3 days after my ring disappeared. And you discover really interesting things, like how someone sold that exact ring to Morrison Jewelers for $800, then bought it back 3 days later for $1,200. Marcus lunged toward the projection system, but Jessica's brother, a linebacker for the local college, stepped in his way. There's more, I said calmly. The next slide showed bank records, credit card statements, financial documents I'd spent months gathering. Marcus, did you want to tell Jessica about the credit card you opened in my name 3 years ago? The one with $12,000 in debt that you've been making minimum payments on to keep it off my credit report? His face went white. Jessica looked between us, confusion replacing her earlier joy. Or maybe you'd prefer I start with the cryptocurrency investment you pitched to Jessica last month? The one where you convinced her to transfer her parents' life insurance money into your account? What are you talking about? Jessica whispered. Check your bank account, I said gently. Her hand shook as she pulled out her phone. I watched the color drain from her face as she scrolled through her transaction history. It's gone, she said, her voice barely audible. All of it. Everything from Mom and Dad. The room erupted. Guests pulled out their phones, some calling police, others recording the confrontation. Marcus tried to push past people toward the exit, but there were too many bodies between him and the door. Wait, I called out, raising my voice over the chaos. I'm not finished. The room fell silent again. Marcus, or should I say Michael Torres, has done this before, multiple times across multiple states. I clicked to the next slide showing driver's licenses with different names, all featuring Marcus's face. Sarah Mitchell in Portland, Amanda Rodriguez in Denver, Jennifer Kim in Austin. Each woman trusted him with their money. Each woman lost everything. The projection showed photos of his previous victims, women who'd agreed to let me share their stories as part of our coordinated case. I've been working with law enforcement and a private investigator for months to build a comprehensive case. We have financial records, witness testimony, and recorded conversations documenting years of systematic fraud. I clicked to audio files, recordings of Marcus explaining his investment schemes, admitting to opening accounts in my name, bragging about how easy it was to manipulate emotional women. The FBI has been very interested in our findings, I continued, especially the wire fraud charges, identity theft across state lines, conspiracy to commit financial fraud. That's when David stepped out of the crowd, my boyfriend of 8 months, the federal prosecutor I'd been dating since long before Marcus and Jessica ever got together, the man who'd been helping me coordinate this case from the beginning. Marcus Thompson, also known as Michael Torres, David said officially, pulling out his badge. You're under arrest for federal wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The FBI will be taking you into custody tonight. The police arrived within minutes, called in advance and waiting outside for my signal. As they read Marcus his rights, he looked back at me with pure hatred. You think you're so smart, he snarled, but you're still pathetic, still alone. I smiled and took David's hand. Actually, I'm not, and I never was as stupid as you thought. Jessica collapsed into a chair, sobbing. The guests stood around in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. I sat beside Jessica, handing her tissues from my purse. I'm sorry, I said, and I meant it. I know this hurts, but he would have destroyed your life completely. How long have you known? She whispered through her tears. About the ring? I noticed it the first day you wore it. About him targeting you? I suspected from the beginning, but I needed proof that would hold up in court. She looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Why didn't you just tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was a jealous ex trying to sabotage your happiness? She was quiet for a long moment, considering. I was so awful to you. You were being manipulated by a professional, I replied. He's had years of practice. I've been where you are. Over the following weeks, the full scope of Marcus's crimes came to light. The FBI investigation revealed a network spanning 7 states and at least 15 victims. He'd stolen over $200,000 using various identities and elaborate schemes. Jessica moved out of our apartment. She couldn't afford rent after losing her inheritance. And honestly, we both needed space to process everything. But before she left, she came to my room with my grandmother's ring. I'm so sorry, she said, tears in her eyes, for everything. The ring, the clothes, the way I treated you. I can't believe I was so blind. Trauma makes us vulnerable, I told her. You were grieving your parents and looking for stability. He exploited that. It's not your fault. Will you ever forgive me? I already have, I said, taking the ring. Take care of yourself, Jessica. You deserve better than what he put you through. The trial took 8 months. Jessica testified about how Marcus had convinced her to give him access to her accounts. Sarah, Amanda, and Jennifer flew in from their respective states to tell their stories. Each testimony painted a picture of systematic predation targeting vulnerable women. I testified for 2 full days, walking the jury through the financial evidence, the recorded conversations, and the pattern of identity theft. David recused himself from prosecuting, conflict of interest, but his colleague, Assistant District Attorney Maria Santos, built an airtight case. Marcus got 12 years in federal prison. More importantly, the judge ordered full restitution to all victims. It would take time. He'd hidden money in offshore accounts that needed to be recovered, but we'd eventually get back what he'd stolen. The conviction made national news as part of a larger investigation into romance fraud. The story featured interviews with his victims, including me. We'd started a support group that helped other women recognize and escape similar situations. 6 months after the trial, I got a text from Jessica. She'd moved back to her hometown and was working as a victims advocate for a nonprofit that helped people recover from financial abuse. "Thank you for saving my life," the message read. "I understand now why you did it the way you did. I'm helping other women who've been through similar situations. Turns out my experience, as terrible as it was, gives me credibility with survivors." A year later, David proposed, with my actual grandmother's ring, which I'd had professionally restored and reappraised after getting it back. He'd asked my father's permission, planned a private dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, and chose a moment when it was just us. No audience, no pressure, no manipulation, just love. The proposal was everything Marcus's performance for Jessica hadn't been. Genuine, thoughtful, based on actually knowing and caring about me as a person, not as a financial target. "How did you know I was different?" I asked David that night as we celebrated with champagne in our apartment. "You mean besides the fact that you ran a background check on me before our 3rd date?" He laughed. "You knew about that. Honey, you asked my ex-wife about our divorce settlement. She called me laughing about how thorough you were." I blushed. I needed to be sure. "I know," he said, pulling me closer. "And I loved that you were careful. It meant when you finally trusted me, it was real." Sometimes people ask how I knew to trust David after everything I'd been through. The truth is, I investigated him just as thoroughly as I'd investigated Marcus. I ran background checks, verified his credentials, spoke with his references, even had coffee with his ex-wife to understand why their marriage had ended. The difference was that David's story checked out completely. His ex-wife spoke warmly about him, explaining that their divorce had been amicable. She'd wanted to move to California for a job opportunity, while he was committed to his prosecutorial work in our city. No hidden debts, no suspicious gaps in employment, no pattern of targeting vulnerable women. Most importantly, David never tried to rush me into vulnerability or access my finances. He paid for his own meals, maintained his own bank accounts, and respected my boundaries around personal information. 2 months ago, I got a letter from prison. Marcus, writing from federal lockup, claiming he'd found religion and wanted to make amends. The letter was full of pseudo-psychological language about understanding his past trauma and taking responsibility for his actions. "I realize now that I was acting out my own pain," he wrote. "I hurt you because I was hurting. I'd like the chance to apologize properly and maybe find some closure for both of us." I showed the letter to David over breakfast. "What do you think?" he asked. I smiled and fed the letter into our paper shredder. "I think some people confuse forgiveness with stupidity," I said. "I forgave him for my own peace of mind years ago, but I don't owe him my time or emotional energy." David kissed my forehead. "That's my brilliant, analytical fiancé. We're getting married next spring. Jessica will be attending. We've rebuilt our friendship slowly over the past 2 years. She's thriving in her work helping other survivors, and she's dating a genuinely nice teacher who volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. Sarah, Amanda, and Jennifer have all recovered financially and emotionally. We stay in touch through our support group, which has grown to help dozens of women who've experienced financial abuse. The group has been so successful that we're expanding to other cities. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd confronted Marcus and Jessica immediately when I first suspected what was happening. If I'd let anger and hurt feelings drive my decisions instead of careful strategy. The truth is, they probably would have convinced people I was a jealous ex making false accusations. Marcus would have moved on to his next victim before law enforcement could build a case. Jessica would have lost her money anyway and blamed me for trying to sabotage her happiness. Instead, I let them think they were winning while I built an unshakable case. I protected not just myself, but every woman who might have come after us. I gathered enough evidence to put a serial predator behind bars for more than a decade. People say revenge is a dish best served cold, but this wasn't revenge. It was justice, served with meticulous planning and irrefutable evidence. And honestly, watching Marcus's face when he realized I'd been 10 steps ahead the whole time, that I'd played him better than he'd ever played anyone, that was worth every sleepless night I'd spent building the case against him. The best part is knowing that somewhere out there are women who will never meet Marcus because he's locked away where he can't hurt anyone. Women who won't lose their life savings or their ability to trust because one predator is finally off the streets. That's a victory worth celebrating.